File 001, A Clockwork Orange. Psychological weapon, behavioral conditioning. What if the most disturbing experiment in A Clockwork Orange was never performed on Alex? What if it was performed on the audience? In 1971, Stanley Kubrick released one of the most controversial films in cinema history. A Clockwork Orange was violent, hypnotic, darkly funny, and almost impossible to forget. But beneath its disturbing imagery lies something far more unsettling than the crimes committed by Alex DeLarge. A question about whether the human mind can be rewritten. Inside the film, violence is treated almost like a disease, and the solution offered by the authorities is terrifyingly simple. Condition the subject until the very thought of violence produces unbearable physical suffering.
They call it the Ludovico Technique. But once we begin examining the psychological ideas behind it, this fictional treatment starts opening doors into real history. Behavioral conditioning, aversion therapy, experiments in human behavior, and the uncomfortable belief that undesirable actions might be controlled by manipulating the mind itself. And that is where this investigation becomes dangerous. Because A Clockwork Orange does not simply ask whether society can stop a violent man. It asks what remains of a human being when someone else controls the boundaries of his choices. Stanley Kubrick constructed the film around that question with extraordinary precision.
The music, production design, performances, camera movements, disturbing humor, and calculated brutality all pull the viewer into Alex's world before forcing us to confront what is eventually done to him. Which raises another possibility. Perhaps Alex is not the only person being conditioned. Perhaps Kubrick is also manipulating our reactions, making us feel disgust, fascination, amusement, and eventually something dangerously close to sympathy for someone we know we should despise. And buried inside the production history are controversies, creative decisions, and psychological ideas that make this file even stranger. So tonight, inside the Shadow Archives, we are not simply revisiting a notorious film. We are opening a case about behavioral control, about free will, and about the moment when cinema began asking a forbidden question. Can you manufacture a good human being? To understand why Kubrick would build such a disturbing psychological machine, however, we first have to return to the document that started everything. A novel Stanley Kubrick almost ignored, and an idea about human freedom that would eventually become one of the most controversial films ever made. But before we go deeper into this file, I want to know where you stand. If someone could eliminate violence from a human being, but only by taking away that person's ability to choose, would you still call it a cure? Or would you call it control?
Leave your answer in the comments, because this is exactly the kind of question the Shadow Reel Archive was created to investigate. There are no comfortable answers here, and sometimes the most important part of opening these files is discovering how differently we interpret the evidence. And if you enjoy investigations that go beyond movie summaries, uncovering hidden psychological mechanisms, disturbing production histories, forbidden ideas, and the strange moments when cinema begins reflecting reality, leave a like on this video. It
helps these investigations reach other viewers who are searching for something deeper beneath the surface of film. And subscribe to Shadow Reel if you want to continue opening these files with us. Because A Clockwork Orange is only the first case in a much larger investigation into cinema's psychological weapons. 5 films, 5 different methods of influencing the human mind, and 5 files waiting inside the Shadow archives. But every investigation has an origin. And this one begins years before Stanley Kubrick ever placed a camera in front of Malcolm McDowell. It begins with Anthony Burgess, a disturbing question about free will, and a book whose most important chapter would mysteriously disappear before reaching millions of readers. File 001. The origin file is now open. The origin of A Clockwork Orange does not begin with Stanley Kubrick. It begins in Britain in 1962, when writer Anthony Burgess published a dystopian novel built around a disturbing contradiction. If you force a human being to behave correctly, have you actually made him good, or have you simply turned him into a machine? Burgess gave that contradiction a name: A Clockwork Orange. At the center of the novel was Alex, a teenage delinquent obsessed with classical music and what he calls ultra-violence. But Burgess made an unusual decision. Instead of allowing us to observe Alex from a safe distance, he trapped us inside his language.
Alex speaks in Nadsat, a strange teenage slang filled with Russian-influenced vocabulary. At first, the reader barely understands him. Then something unsettling happens. You adapt. Without realizing it, you begin learning Alex's language. And already, the conditioning has begun. But one of the strangest clues in this forbidden origin appeared when the novel crossed the Atlantic. The original British edition contained 21 chapters. For the American publication, the final chapter was removed. In Burgess's original ending, Alex eventually begins losing interest in violence and imagines another kind of life. His transformation comes from within. In the American version, that possibility disappears. And years later, Stanley Kubrick would adapt the version without that final chapter. That changes the psychological weapon hidden inside the story. Kubrick began production in England in September 1970, directing, writing, and producing the film himself. Shooting continued into February 1971, using locations around London and southern England, alongside work connected with Pinewood and EMI MGM studios. Places like Thamesmead became Alex's brutalist world, while Brunel University in Uxbridge became part of the Ludovico medical facility. And standing at the center of it all was Malcolm McDowell as Alex DeLarge, surrounded by Warren Clark as Dim, James Marcus as Georgie, Patrick McGee as writer Frank Alexander, Adrienne Corey as his wife, Michael Bates as the prison chief guard, and Carl During as Dr. Brodsky. Kubrick was creating a dystopian future without escaping very far from the present. That may be why it still feels so uncomfortable. When A Clockwork Orange opened in New York and Los Angeles on December 19, 1971, audiences were not simply being introduced to another science fiction nightmare. They were entering a psychological experiment about violence, authority, behavioral conditioning, and free will. And here is where our investigation takes its first dangerous turn. Because Kubrick was about to take Burgess's philosophical question and transform it into something audiences could actually watch happening to a human body. A chair, a restrained subject, eyes forced open, images of violence, music, nausea, repetition. The fictional procedure had a name: the Ludovico Technique. And once we examine what inspired that idea, the distance between dystopian cinema and real behavioral science becomes much smaller than it first appears. If you're still inside the archive with me, leave just 2 words below: choice matters. Because in the next part of this file, we enter the laboratory.
And this is where the file enters the laboratory. In A Clockwork Orange, the Ludovico technique appears almost futuristic. Alex volunteers for an experimental treatment, believing it will secure his freedom from prison. Instead, he is strapped to a chair, his eyelids held open while violent images are projected before him. Drugs make him violently ill, and repetition does the rest. The objective is not to convince Alex that violence is wrong. It is to make violence physically unbearable. That distinction is the key to the entire investigation. The fictional procedure echoes principles of classical conditioning and aversion therapy. Repeatedly associate a behavior or stimulus with an unpleasant response until the association itself begins producing distress.
The idea has deep roots in behavioral psychology, from Ivan Pavlov's famous conditioning experiments to 20th century attempts to modify human behavior through rewards, punishment, and aversive stimuli. But Kubrick turns those ideas into something far more disturbing. Alex is not taught morality. His body is programmed against his own desires. Even Beethoven, the music he genuinely loves, becomes contaminated because it accompanies the violent images during the treatment. When Alex realizes what has happened, the experiment suddenly stops looking like rehabilitation and starts resembling psychological imprisonment. And Kubrick wanted the audience to feel it physically.
During the Ludovico scenes, Malcolm McDowell's eyes were held open using surgical lid locks, while a doctor remained nearby applying drops. McDowell later described the filming as extremely painful, and he suffered a scratched cornea during the process. The discomfort we see on screen therefore contains something unsettlingly real. But the deeper psychological weapon is hidden in what happens afterward. Alex leaves prison apparently cured, yet when threatened, humiliated, or attacked, he cannot defend himself without becoming sick. The state has eliminated one behavior by damaging his ability to choose it. This is where A Clockwork Orange transforms from dystopian cinema into a philosophical warning. If morality requires choice, can forced goodness still be called goodness?
And perhaps this is why the film remains so disturbing more than 50 years later. The nightmare is not simply that human behavior can be influenced. We already know that it can. The nightmare is deciding who gets to define which behaviors must disappear. Because once a government, institution, or authority claims the power to redesign human behavior, rehabilitation can quietly become control. And the next evidence in this forbidden file suggests that the controversy did not remain inside Kubrick's fictional laboratory. It escaped into the real world. If
If one phrase summarizes the evidence we've uncovered here, leave it in the archive. Choice is human. Because in Block 3, we investigate what happened when A Clockwork Orange left the laboratory and society began reacting to the experiment.
And then, the experiment escaped the screen. After A Clockwork Orange reached British cinemas in January 1972, the controversy surrounding it began growing almost as rapidly as its reputation. Critics debated its violence, politicians condemned it, and newspapers started connecting disturbing real-world crimes to Kubrick's film. One widely reported case involved a teenage boy convicted of manslaughter after the killing of a homeless man. His defense referred to A Clockwork Orange, and the press quickly embraced the possibility of copycat violence. Other incidents were also associated with the movie, sometimes because attackers allegedly imitated its costumes, language, or imagery. But this is where a shadow reel investigation has to separate evidence from mythology.
The fact that newspapers connected crimes to the film does not prove that Kubrick's movie caused them. The relationship between violent media and violent behavior has remained far more complicated than those headlines suggested. Yet, for Kubrick, the consequences became deeply personal. The director publicly rejected claims that his film could transform otherwise normal people into criminals. At the same time, he and his family reportedly received threats, while the controversy surrounding A Clockwork Orange continued escalating. Then, something extraordinary happened. In 1973, Kubrick asked Warner Brothers to withdraw the film from circulation in the United Kingdom. For decades, British audiences could not legally see A Clockwork Orange in cinemas through normal distribution.
It developed the aura of a forbidden movie, discussed, copied, imported, and surrounded by rumors, while remaining officially unavailable in Britain until after Kubrick's death on March 7, 1999. The film returned to British cinemas in March 2000. And suddenly, the final irony becomes impossible to ignore. Kubrick made a movie about authorities attempting to control human behavior by controlling what someone is allowed to experience. Then, society began debating whether audiences themselves should be protected from experiencing Kubrick's movie. The film became part of the very argument it was investigating. More than 50 years later, that may be the most disturbing evidence inside File 001.
A Clockwork Orange never proved that cinema could program a human being, but it exposed how quickly fear of psychological influence can become justification for control. Control the stimulus, control the response, control the choice. The Ludovico Technique may be fictional. The desire to influence human behavior is not. And somewhere inside the shadow archives, another file is already waiting. File 001, A Clockwork Orange, Psychological Weapon, Behavioral Conditioning. Case status closed. But the experiment has only begun.